Our grant does include a partnership with CompTIA, and CompTIA is the Illinois Information Technology Learning Exchange lead, and I know you've all heard us talk, and many of you are participating in those learning exchanges. Of course, we can't do this without you and our employers. As a reminder, the eligible participants for this project are long-term unemployed job seekers, which means they have to be at least 27 weeks since the recession of December 2007 to June 2009. It can be a UI recipient that's been profiled as likely to exhaust benefits, or it can be a foreign-trained immigrant worker who qualifies as a dislocated worker and additionally faces barriers. I think that's sort of my intro, and I will turn it over to Jill so she can get into the details of what service strategies and the types of expenditures and give you additional information on the application process.
Good afternoon. This is Jill, and we'll go ahead and get started then on talking about some of the specifics with the job-driven NEG project. Back in April, we had I believe we had a webinar to introduce you to the project, because at that time we were moving forward with an application to Department of Labor for this project. So I know to some extent you're familiar with it, but we'll go ahead and go through some of the specifics. What I'd like to do right now is talk about some of the elements of the project, and then towards the end of the webinar we're going to discuss the application, so we'll get into a little bit more detail. At this point I just wanted to hit on some of the highlights as far as some of the service strategy and expenditures. So keep in mind with this particular project, some of the things Lisa just mentioned, that we're moving forward with kind of an early implementation on some of the job-driven workforce system elements, and so we're going to be talking a lot about accelerated training. We're going to be talking about work-based training and using some innovation as far as dealing with job matching and job coaching, those types of things. So keep that in mind as we move through today's webinar, and then also as you develop your grant application. With this particular NEG that DOL put out there for all of the states, they had a component this time where they wanted us to specify an industry. So the industry, based on the review of some data, this was again back in April or so, we submitted our application. The Illinois application targets information technology. One of the things I just mentioned a minute ago was with this particular project, DOL and DCEO, we're looking for innovative approaches to providing services. What's going to lead us to good results as far as entered employment rate, retention, earnings, that type of thing. So what's listed here specifically: job matching, job coaching, possibly at the local level you could use long-term unemployed navigators. And of course that's going to mean different things to different people, but obviously designating someone to help the long-term unemployed navigate the system, the workforce system. The use of social media, other things that we're going to be interested in hearing from you in the application about what it is that you're going to be doing specifically in your area. Another component was in DOL's putting out the word for this job-driven NEG was just a matter of working with other federal programs. So some of the programs are listed in here, and I know that that's no problem at the local level that you do that. So that's something that we'll be reading about in your application, or the programs that you're going to be working with, coordinating with. One thing that I wanted to point out is many of you, maybe half of the OEs are involved currently with the dislocated worker training NEG, the DWT NEG. So I do want to mention some things as we're talking to kind of point out some differences, because you've been doing this for the past year and you may have some thoughts of how you're operating that project, and you have to follow the same guidelines for this project. So let me start by saying, with this job-driven NEG project, co-enrollment of participants into the formula grant is not required. That's because with this grant, comprehensive services can be provided from this grant, meaning core, intensive training, supportive services. You can pay for all of those out of this grant. The DWT grant, as you know, it was limited to training. So I wanted to emphasize that. This is a comprehensive grant. Another key part is what we had mentioned is the earn while you learn. We're looking for many, if not most of the participants to be involved in work-based training, which could be OJTs, it could be customized training, paid work experience and internships, and also apprenticeships. We're going to be talking more about that later. Gretchen in particular will talk more about that. We'll have training on this. It's such a key part that if anybody is not used to doing so much in these areas or is struggling with ideas or templates, that type of thing, we want to be there to assist you with developing that piece. Because again, it is a key part of the job-driven NEG workforce system. So again, not only for this project, but then as we move forward in implementing the new legislation. As I said, this is comprehensive, so you can have your funds can be used towards core intensive supportive services and training. And another piece then is partnership development. We'll talk more about partnership development when we get to the application, but at the local level, what that means is basically that you do have funds set aside that you can use for convening partners, having meetings, pulling together partners, trying to reach out and expand your base. So there are specific funds set aside for partnership development at the local level. We have some at the state level too, which involves the IT learning exchange, and Gretchen will talk more about that a little bit later. And then going on to the next one, the next bullet point there, again at the state level we've got funds set aside for employment tools and partnership costs. This was something the Department of Labor included in this NEG because they felt it was such a critical part of the success of the project. So this is something new we hadn't seen before, where DOL set aside money specifically for employment tools and partnership costs. Program staff costs are allowable under this grant. They just need to be reasonable and necessary. So if we're talking about core and intensive staff, or we're talking about training staff, in your application you will be able to include costs for your staff. Again, it just has to be reasonable and necessary. Okay, the next three slides I just want to touch on briefly. You've seen these before in our earlier webinar, and these have been out there. They are out there now on the Job-Driven NEG webpage that WorkNet has set up for us. So what I wanted to remind you that this data is out there, and the first screen is the IT occupations. So these show the top, in this case, the top 11 occupations for the state of Illinois. The IT occupations is the first screen. The second screen then moves on to the top 10 industries. And the final screen is the occupations, the employment projections. So I wanted to point out that, again, you've seen this before, but to get more information, you could go to the web page that we have a link to, I think towards the end of this webinar. But the web page then also has some ELWEA-specific information, so you can look at that data too. I do want to point out that Chris Reynolds will be able to assist you with questions you have about this, and I believe Lacey's putting up that information now as far as Chris Reynolds' contact information, his email address. So feel free, as you're looking at your LMI data, to contact Chris, and he could help with that information as far as explaining it in more detail. Okay, so like I said, I just wanted to briefly touch on those screens, the LMI data. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to Gretchen with CompTIA, and she's got a few screens here then dealing with the career pathways, the employment tools, and partnership development. So Gretchen, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and I know that you don't have access to seeing what we're seeing, so I'll let you know that right now we've got pulled up on the screen, the webinar is the career pathways spring.
Yes, thank you, Jill. And actually, I have been able to follow because you've been so clear in your presentation that it was very obvious which slide you were on. So thanks for doing such a great, clear job. And once again, my name is Gretchen Cook, and I am with CompTIA. And I have to say, we are very pleased to be partnering with the state on the JD NEG grant program. I have visited several LWIAs and WorkNext centers around the state over the years. And I've observed some of the issues that you all face when you're trying to help unemployed individuals either enter IT for the first time or re-enter the IT workforce from unemployment. And many of you have told me that you find the IT sector very complex. There's a multitude of IT certifications that are all kind of an alphabet soup of confusion, and you're not familiar with what IT jobs are available or in demand in your community, or what knowledge and skill sets would be required to fill those jobs. But the really important thing to know is that IT is the highest growing industry sector in the state. And last year, there were over 90,000 open IT jobs in Illinois, many of which went unfilled because there wasn't a link between these jobs and the many unemployed Illinoisans who could have been trained and certified to qualify for many of these positions, because many of these positions are at the entry level, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I really think this grant presents us with a wonderful opportunity to work together to find ways to assist you in assessing and coaching and matching the skill sets of these candidates to get them on a great career pathway in IT. So as Jill said, I'm going to go over at a very high level just some of the ways that CompTIA will be offering you support through the grant. And the details of all of this will become more clear as the implementation phase of the grant begins. But let's start off with a look at what the IT pathways look like for Illinois. So it would begin with an IT career orientation and plan for the individual. And I'll be going over some of the tools that you'll have to use to assist you in the process of creating this in just a minute. But once you've determined that an individual has the technical aptitude to be able to succeed in IT, you also need to know which IT pathway is best suited for them. And this generally falls into two broad categories, either that of a computer or network support technician, or a programming, website, mobile apps development pathway, or database pathway, all at the entry level, but then working their way up into the mid-level and higher level career opportunities in IT. Because many of you may also find that there are actually some in the ranks of the long-term unemployed in your communities who have already worked in IT, and they just need to update their skills and receive assistance with resume writing, et cetera. But they could qualify for higher level or mid-career IT positions that are more specialized. So you'll need to know about these skill sets and the IT certifications that align with them in these advanced job opportunities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I want to, as I said, give you an indication of some of the employment tools that we're going to be working with. And you'll need to know in each of your communities what IT jobs are open and in demand locally. Who are the employers that are posting IT job opportunities? And what industries are they coming from? Because a lot of people think, okay, for a person to get a job in IT, they have to be working in an IT company. But what you find when you look at the data is that many, many IT jobs are in industry sectors across the spectrum. So the software tools that we will be using for this exploration are from a company that's called Burning Glass. And they will really help with this employer identification and customization of labor management, labor marketing information resources. You may be familiar with Burning Glass. They have software that combs job postings for all industry sectors all the time. They aggregate the data, and then they parse it to develop a remarkable portfolio of workforce development tools and resources. And we here at CompTIA, within our marketing research team, have been already using Burning Glass, their LMI, to develop nationwide and state-specific, and in some instances, city-specific IT LMI reports for several years now. And for this grant, our market research department will use our software from Burning Glass to develop customized LMI reports for each participating LWIA. Additionally, we've been working with Burning Glass to find out other resources they have available, and they will be able to provide even some greater level of detail with additional LMI reports that we'll also be able to provide to the participating LWIAs. So the next aspect is participant screening, job coaching, and matching. And we've already begun to research and identify the best kinds of tools that can help you with these tasks for IT. So things like technical aptitude tests to determine if IT is the right pathway for an individual to pursue, because we don't want to take anyone down this path if they don't have the technical aptitude necessary to succeed in the IT career pathway. And then further computer skills assessment tools to help further define which IT career direction the individual to head in. And an assortment of additional tools from Burning Glass that's part of what they call their focus tools. And we had just an amazing demo recently with them where they showed us all sorts of things like how they are able to survey the individual to determine what specific skills they have perhaps in other industry sectors, say like retail, that could be transferable to IT jobs that are entry-level and mid-career for the job changers. All sorts of career exploration tools and data, as well as CompTIA's tools and resources like our certification roadmap. Okay, ready for the next slide? Two other types of employment tools that we'll be providing you with fall into the categories of work-based training and accelerated training. The first are some work-based training tools that are also available from Burning Glass. These include things like IT career exploration tools that can help inform you and the participant about the nature of the IT jobs that are open and the skill sets and certifications that would be required for these jobs. They also provide matching tools that help align those required skill sets with the language used in resume writing that's specific to the jobs that are open in your community, as well as how to identify those transferable skills from their earlier work experience in other industry sectors that the participant might have, and translate them into the IT sector desirable skills. And as Jill said, another big emphasis for this grant, besides work-based learning, is for things like internships and apprenticeships, but also in general in the new legislation for WIOA, is the need for what they call accelerated learning tools These are tools that would facilitate a shorter time frame for the education and training component of getting a long-term individual back into the workforce. And since many of the entry-level IT technician jobs that are open in every community involve gaining a CompTIA certification, one of the tools that will be made available to you in your ALWIA is the CertMaster tool. This is a tool that's available for CompTIA's Strata or A+, or Network Plus, or Security Plus certifications, and it truly facilitates an open exit training model that accelerates the learning process and acquisition of skills, especially for those participants who come to you with some experience or familiarity with the content in IT for one of these certifications. It's a very useful tool not only for the user, but also for the instructor, as it allows the instructor to observe the progress of their students a module at a time, individually, but also in the aggregate for the entire class. So they can really track the individuals as well as the entire class's progress as they move through the modules. And it lets them know when someone's ready to sit for an exam. So it accelerates not only the mastery of the content, but it also increases long-term retention of the content. And then finally, there will also be participant outreach and recruitment and career information, including IT career pathway information, salary information of the in-demand jobs, and assistance in understanding that multitude of certification requirements, including the credentials that are stackable along various pathways, as well as an IT certification roadmap that spells out the plethora of certifications that are out there in IT. Okay, the next slide. Okay, and then finally, there's this whole area that Jill alluded to of partnership development with your local IT employers and other community organizations. So a very substantial part of the grant, as we talked about earlier, focuses on providing those work-based learning experiences through things like paid internships or apprenticeships, which, as we all know, really requires the participation of your local employers. And we've already talked about the local employer data that you'll be getting from the customized Burning Glass reports that shows you, okay, who are the employers that are actually doing the hiring and have listed open IT jobs. We'll also provide a train-the-trainer model for reaching out to local employers and recruiting them for these work-based learning opportunities. How do you go about doing that? I'm the first to admit that our IT employers sometimes are not as engaged in local workforce development areas as some other industries have become used to doing that. So we will be providing training webinars as well for any ALWIA who would like some additional support. We'll be willing to send our program managers for the grant along with you on site visits to your local IT employers to assist you in just getting used to how you talk about these things to IT employers, if that would be helpful to you. We'll also be developing marketing and communications pieces that explain the job-driven national NEG grant program and how employers will benefit by contributing to these internship or apprenticeship or on-the-job training opportunities. And lastly, we'll provide guidance on partnership expansion, including recruiting knowledgeable IT educators and commercial training providers who can assist with helping you get the accelerated learning that's needed for the grant to help get these people back into the workforce as quickly as possible. Also outreach materials for other kinds of partners beyond the employers like CBOs, local unions, IT associations, as well as other community partners. And again, marketing templates will be provided for outreach and recruitment purposes to these types of organizations, as well as specific information for your training partners on informing them about things like CertMaster and how they could use these tools in their classrooms. So I know I just threw a whole lot of stuff at you, and it was at a high level, but as I said, the details will emerge as we move into the implementation phase, and we really do look forward to working with you to work together to craft better solutions to help long-time unemployed people into the available IT jobs in the state of Illinois. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen. I did want to point out that there was a question asked about these employment tools. Are they a part of the grant? And yes, they are a part of the grant. They're being provided to the LWIAs. As Gretchen explained, we're going to be doing training on this, and so everybody will have an opportunity to learn more about the tools and use them and implement them into their local areas. Not only, again, for this grant, but it'll be useful as we move forward with implementing the new act, the new legislation. There was a question about IT employers being in the public sectors. Let me go ahead and address that, or maybe Lisa or somebody, you can type it while I'm talking. For OJT, they cannot be in the public sector, but for other opportunities, in particular work experience, you are able to use public sector employers. But again, I do want to stress for OJT, we cannot use public sector employers. What I wanted to do, because we have time, we're going to be talking about the grant application here in a minute, but in follow-up to Gretchen's presentation, I did want to open it up for some questions right now. But first of all, I guess what I wanted to mention is we're excited about this component. In particular, the Department of Labor set aside funds specifically for employment tools and partnership development. The situation that we have in Illinois, as you know, is that we have the Race to the Top project, and we have the various learning exchanges for the industries. The IT learning exchange is CompTIA, so that's how we were able to join forces with them and get a running start, because they've been very heavily involved in this. And at this point, I did want to mention Bob Sheets, because Bob has been working closely with Gretchen for quite a while on this. IT in particular, the learning exchange, and talking about employer engagement and outreach and those types of things. So at this point, I do want to open it up. Bob, if you have anything that you want to add, or Gretchen, before we open it up to questions, if there's anything you want to emphasize or mention before we open it up to questions.
Well, you bring up a good point about some of the lessons learned with the IT Learning Exchange, also with work that we're doing within Chicago Public Schools with the early college STEM schools. All of these activities involve work-based learning because work experience is such an important component of being able to get full-time employment. As I'm sure you're all aware, CompTIA does research in the area of IT employment on an annual basis. We have annual surveys that we do to IT employers every single year. And one of the questions that we always ask is, what's the most important factor when looking at one candidate over another? What's the thing that rises to the top in terms of whether you choose one candidate over another? And it's not the credentials, whether they're academic or whether they're industry certifications. The thing that's at the top of the employer's list year after year after year is work experience. And so when you're someone who's like many of these people that will be going through this program who haven't had work experience in IT, those internships, those apprenticeships, the OJT is so critical in making them able to be considered in a very realistic way by future employers. And we know the same thing in secondary and post-secondary education for the students for the work that we're doing with the Learning Exchange. So we've gained a lot of knowledge about this through that activity, about how do you recruit those employers, how do you make the case to them that this is a win-win situation, not only for the person or the student who's looking for a job, but also for them, because as I said, there are all these open jobs in the state of Illinois in IT, and if these people want to grow their business or grow their department, they need more well-qualified IT people. And so if they have the opportunity to actually have interns that are paid for them to be able to pay for an internship, then they have the opportunity to try these people out themselves on their own turf. So it truly is a win-win, and we have really learned a lot from the work that we've been doing with the Learning Exchange.
This is Ashish. If I can build on Gretchen's comment, if I want to point your attention to the career pathway model that has those two positions there, like Gretchen mentioned, what we're finding in IT is people want to know what you did, not what you studied. What have you done? Which means some sort of evidence of experience. And what we're finding is if you look across all of your all the different numbers that Chris Reynolds produced and what you're going to get from Burning Glass, is the most largest openings statewide are those positions that are in the middle of that pathway model, which can get people there fast, would hit our wage goals for dislocated workers in the state of Illinois, and provides then the stepping stones of work experience for the other pathways. So a lot of the tools that Gretchen and her team will be providing you, if you want, are tools that can support that first step. So I would urge you all to kind of look at those entry-level positions that are in the middle of the entry-level jobs, and look in your own LWEA for the numbers that Chris Reynolds produced based on the IDS and Burning Glass information, and of which Burning Glass will provide you more through Gretchen. I would urge you all to look at those opportunities for work-based learning for a lot of the clients you serve.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and open up the phone lines if anyone wants to go ahead and ask a question. The phone lines are unmuted, so go ahead and do that. And if you want to type questions, we can continue to try to follow those and answer those questions. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions, so we'll go ahead and move forward with the next phase of the webinar. If you do have questions,
your microphone has been turned on,
and type them into the chat pod. Okay, so moving on to the next screen, the LWEA grant application. And I just wanted to point out some things, some kind of big picture types of items to bring to your attention. As we talked about, Illinois did receive $6.175 million for this project. A key part of it, as we've talked about, is the employment tools and partnership development. And so with those funds set aside for that, what we have available for the LWEAs is $5,250,000. That's the amount of the grant awards that we'll be making. And I do want to point out that as we go through this and we talk about some things in particular, this is based on the application that we submitted to Department of Labor. We had asked for initial or interest surveys from LWEAs who were interested in participating in this project. They were very brief surveys rather than applications that gave us an idea of, first of all, who was interested, how much were they interested in applying for, how many people could they serve, what might their budget look like in terms of work-based learning, training, supportive services. Based on the interest surveys we received, we developed our application for Department of Labor, submitted that, and that's what was approved. So as we go forward in implementing this project, we go back to our approved agreement with Department of Labor, and we have to hit all those benchmarks and expenditure rates and those types of things. So, having said that, again, we have available for LWEAs $5,250,000. The application you have now, you can download that if you haven't. It is available there for download. And I do want to mention that we have WorkNet. There's a job-driven NEG webpage. So the grant application is posted on the webpage also along with other project material, including the webinar, some of the LMI data I mentioned earlier, some of DOL's documents, guidance, if it deals with OJTs or it deals with this particular project. So be sure to refer to the job-driven NEG webpage. With the application being released today, there's basically 3 weeks then to develop and submit a grant application. So the applications are due Wednesday, September 10th. The grant period is October 1st through September 30th of 16, so it's a 2-year project. A minimum request is $200,000. We wouldn't really expect anybody to be coming in under that. As far as a maximum, we don't really have a maximum, but keep in mind that the total funding available is $5.25 million. And so anyway, I just wanted to point out the minimum request in particular would be $200,000. Budget requirements. Again, these budget requirements are based on our approved project with Department of Labor. So the work-based training, which is OJT, customized training, work experience, internships, registered apprenticeships, that is 40% of your expenditures. And I do want to explain that because, as you probably are familiar with, the guidelines that the Department of Labor put out is that it has to be at least 30% of expenditure of our state expenditures. Well, when we look at our state expenditures and we have the costs at the higher level, the grantee level, meaning DCEO, which includes DCEO costs and then the partnership and employment tools, when we factor that in along with the LWEA funding of the $5.25 million, what that means is that 30% then of costs creeps up to 35% when you're just looking at LWEA costs. So that explains how we've gone from DOL, what you see in writing, a minimum of 30% up to 35%, because we're looking solely at LWEA budgets. And then to go further, with the grant application that we submitted to DOL and was approved, we put it in at saying that the LWEAs would be having I think it was a 40% rate for work-based training. I want to point out that the interest surveys that we received exceeded that. The average was about 50%. So we don't think that this will be a problem with the applications because the initial interest surveys, you had very high rates of work-based training. So again, the minimum is 40%, and that again is based on our approved projects with Department of Labor. Another percentage, partnership development, which again is funds set aside for your use at the local level to convene a partnership, develop a partnership, implement that. And so it's meeting costs, what other costs are necessary for your partnership development. When you look at your budget, up to 2.8% of your total budget can be for partnership development. You don't have to have any. I mean, it could be zero. But if you want funds for partnership development, you are limited to 2.8%. Admin, a limit of 5.7% of your total expenditures of your total budget for admin. Program staff costs. Again, it is allowed that you have core and intensive and training services, so the staff associated with that. There isn't a set dollar amount. It just needs to be reasonable and necessary, and this is something that DOL stresses, their expectation. So it's evident that they'll be looking at that to make sure that, you know, our costs are reasonable, not only at the LWIA level, but when we roll it up at the state level. The next item is supportive services. With that, there's no particular guidelines. It just needs to be consistent with your local policies. The next screen is the grant application. We'll go ahead and pull up the grant application. And this should look familiar to you. This is, it's very similar to what we used a year ago for the dislocated worker training NEG project. I'm not planning to go through this in detail, but I did want to hit some highlights on this, of the application itself. So first of all, before I start to scroll through, let me mention that this is the first part of this, and I guess I'll go ahead and scroll down now, but the first part of this will look familiar because it's the standard DCEO application. So you'll be filling that in as you're used to doing, and then there are a few areas, for example, on this page 1, you know, typically you've got to be indicating the participants being served. So be sure to have that tie in then to later in your application where you are showing the number of participants being served. As we scroll down then, this page typically has to do with your administration of this grant and other grants. When we scroll to the next page, the proposal information, this page is really key to its focusing on this job-driven NEG. So you'll see here the information that it asks from you is for this particular project. So for example, the project location, the LWIA is being served, so if it's just yours, indicate that, but if there's multiple LWIAs, go ahead and list those. And then the project period is already filled in, October 1st this year through 9/30/16. And then another element to be sure to fill in is the funding requested from DCEO, and again having that match up to other parts of your project. I'm pointing these out because quite often I think you're so used to filling these applications out, this DCEO standard application, that sometimes these elements get omitted. They get skipped over. I did want to point out then that section 4 is do go ahead and fill in the tasks. With your startup and implementation, the oversight, go ahead and provide the information here, and there's a date column too. So be sure to fill in, there's 15 tasks there. Go ahead and fill those in. The performance measure section you don't need to complete because that's going to be provided in section 8 where we've got some project-specific information. Moving down then to the next part relating specifically to the job-driven NEG is section 7, the budget. So fill in the amounts for the budget, and in a second when I scroll down you'll see where there's the details provided. This section here you're really just providing the dollar amount. So requested grant budget amount, fill that in. These are the budget lines, and these do match up to GRS, what's going to be in GRS. Some of the parameters are listed there. For example, the partnership development, 2.8% maximum, admin, 5.7% maximum. When you go on down to the next page, you will see detail then, where for each of those budget lines, we're asking for detail. You'll have the opportunity to go ahead and indicate the total here in a box that's presented there. I know you can't see it here, but there is a text box. And then below, there'll be a text box for each of these where you can go further then to provide the detail. Because what we want to see when we review these, rather than following up and having any kind of a meeting or a phone call to gather additional information, we need for you to provide the detail here to explain for each of these budget lines what's included in that. Go ahead and show your calculation, show who it is, if it's staff, and not necessarily names, but job titles. anyway, with each of these budget lines, go ahead and provide the detail that will show us how you arrived at that. So occupational training will be shown there. One thing I haven't mentioned, but I do want to stress, is that the occupational training, it does need to result in industry-recognized credentials. That's included there in the description. Work-based training, I do want to point out that because of the way DOL lays out their project, you're going to see where OJT is always set aside separately from other work-based training. So you'll see a budget line here for work-based training, OJT. So go ahead and show what you plan to do there as far as number of participants times X amount, an average, per hour. Go ahead and show your calculation there so we can understand what's going on. But there is a work-based training OJT, and then there's a work-based training all other. So the all other includes the customized training, the paid work experience, internships, registered apprenticeships. So again, break out the detail here. So for example, if you're planning to do customized training, provide some discussion here and numbers and calculations on customized training. If you're also planning to do work experience or internships, again, provide any kind of description and calculation so we can see what it is that's based on. Other training related, we did want to capture your information that has to do with other costs associated with the training. For example, the books, supplies, testing, certification, employment tools, and also things that aren't classified elsewhere as far as training costs. So if you've got a training cost and it doesn't seem to really fit anywhere, then go ahead and put it here, but be sure to have the description and the calculation so we can understand exactly what it is that you're proposing. And then if we have questions or if we feel that it belongs somewhere else, it can be moved. So the other training related captures the things I have listed, and then things that are training related that you don't feel fit anywhere else. Supportive services, again showing the calculation, how you arrived at that. For example, if you provide transportation, go ahead and provide a little description and a calculation. If it's child care, whatever it is, go ahead and show the breakout. But again, it does need to be consistent with your local policy. Partnership development, go ahead and provide the description on how you plan to utilize those funds and along with the calculation. And then the last item there is admin. Below that, we're just capturing the total, and then also there's a box there that you would type in the total number of participants and the cost per participant. The next section gets into the narrative part of this, where you're going to be addressing your particular project, what it is that your model looks like, what you're proposing to do. There's a lot of flexibility, but as a reminder, the key elements of this are the accelerated training, the work-based training, reaching out to the target group, doing innovative services. So for example, that first question really does hit on all of that, basically saying, here's an opportunity to just lay out how your proposed project meets the review criteria. We pointed out that when we're reviewing the applications, we're going to be reviewing this with an emphasis on the demonstrated need. Not only need because of eligible dislocated workers, but also need in terms of the job openings, the IT job openings and the employer partners that are out there. Also then, we're going to be reviewing this with an emphasis on your entire project plan and design, what you're putting in this application, what you're laying out for us to review, and then also your capacity to deliver the results, the likelihood that you'll be successful in carrying the project out. So anyway, I don't want to go through all of these questions, but the first section has to do with the work plan. And one thing I do want to point out that typically with Department of Labor NEG grants, they expect that enrollments are completed within 6 months of the startup. We proposed stretching it out for a longer period. So with the enrollments, what we expect to happen and what you need to kind of design your program around is that all of the enrollments would occur by December 31st of 2015. That would give you another after the final enrollments, that would give you another 9 months to get people in the training, get them in their work-based training, and get all that completed by September 30th. So I did want to point out the reasoning behind the December 31st enrollment deadline. I shouldn't call it a deadline, but that's what our goal is. And again, it's consistent with what Department of Labor looks for in their NEG projects. Moving on down, then, the other sections have to do with the training components, the occupational training, with the opportunity to talk about some of these, you know, if you're going to be doing class size training or accelerated training. There's a question there dealing with the approved training providers. As a reminder, the training you do have to utilize the training providers on the approved list. So one point of discussion is, as you're looking through and developing the project and identifying training that's needed, looking at occupations, is there a need to expand that training provider list? Will you need to be expanding that and adding training providers to the list? The next section is the work-based learning, and that really is an opportunity to let us know what it is that you're planning to do, which of the work-based trainings you're planning to do. And then I do want to point out the third item that's mentioned there is recognizing that ideally with what we're hearing, what we're learning with the IT occupations in particular is that we have greatest success when we couple the occupational training, where it results in a credential, with work-based trainings, if it's an OJT or if it's work experience, whatever it is. So there's the opportunity for you there to talk about how you plan to couple the training, what your model looks like in terms of providing both services. And I do want to mention that you're able to provide multiple trainings. For example, if there's more than one course that the person needs to be taking, that's possible, that's allowable. The same thing with work-based trainings. You may decide for a particular participant, the best thing for that participant, what they need is maybe, there might be 2 work-based trainings. There might be a work experience and an OJT. So again, it's an opportunity there with that particular item to talk about your model and what it is that you're proposing to do. In participant and employer recruitment, there's an opportunity there then to address what your method is going to be for reaching out and recruiting the participants. As you know, the success of the project is based on your success in reaching out to the participants and getting dislocated workers enrolled in the project. If we struggle with that part, then we struggle with the rest of the project. So it is critical that you have a good, solid process and system for identifying and recruiting eligible dislocated workers. I do want to point out that with that, it mentions what you're going to be using to identify eligible dislocated workers, especially the long-term unemployed. It mentions the 3 target groups there. So I want to point out that with the target groups, they are target groups, but you can enroll other eligible dislocated workers in addition to the target groups. Another way of saying that is that this project, the job-driven NEG, does not have to be 100% of the target group. We're not going to give you a particular percentage as far as the goal. We're not going to say that it needs to be 50% or 60 or 80%. What we can tell you is the Department of Labor and DCEO expects that we will have significant enrollments of that priority group, but we also expect that there will be some dislocated workers enrolled in the project who are not part of that target group. They have to be eligible dislocated workers, and we do want to prioritize and emphasize service to the target group, but we don't have to exclude other eligible dislocated workers along the way. They can be enrolled. Here's where I mentioned the December 31st, 2015 enrollment deadline, and you'll have an opportunity to address that. I guess moving on, then the coordination of services, you'll be talking about who it is that you're working with, how you're coordinating in terms of other services. Project management. With those elements, it is a matter of discussing with your particular project, your model, how it is that you're going to be watching over it and then making adjustments as you see things aren't happening as you had anticipated, that maybe you're behind in enrollments or expenditures. So this last section is critical in that it's important that we see that you have a management plan to oversee the project and make adjustments as necessary, what role your workforce board is going to play, discussing the monitoring of that. And then also there's a question here that if as a part of this grant application there's multiple LWIAs involved, describe what your organizational structure looks like, the organization and management, the service delivery, how it's decided who serves how many or what the budgets look like. And then also a statement asking for describing the local policies, how you're going to determine which local policies you're going to be following in terms of supportive services and training. Assuming that if, for example, you have two LWIAs joining together for this project, it's likely that the two LWIAs would have differing supportive services and training policies. So addressing how you would deal with that. The last question here is that if you do have a contractor, then go ahead and describe the contractor, what their role is, their responsibility, timelines, adhering to procurement policies, that type of thing. The last section deals with performance, and it doesn't show up here, but in the actual grant application, there is a box for each of these elements. So we're just wanting you to summarize some of the information here as far as how many people are going to be getting core and intensive services, enrolled in training. These first 11 items are 1 through 11. This is what DOL requests. This is what they gather, and that's why it's laid out that way. It's basically the format of DOL and what they're requesting. The other information below is just some summary information that gives us an idea of what it is that what your project looks like in terms of, with this project, your entered employment rate. And we've made a note here that it should be greater than your negotiated dislocated worker entered employment rate. Not necessarily significantly. For example, if your usual rate is 80, it'd be fine to say 83, 85, 80, it doesn't need to be extremely or significantly increased. But the bottom line is, with this project, it's expected that the way we're operating this, the tools you're using, the types of things that we're doing, the components with the innovation, the work-based training, we're going to have greater success with this project in placing people. So that's why it says greater than your negotiated entered employment rate. Also displaying then what your goal is for employment retention, average earnings, and then percent of participants in the priority population. Do you plan that, 50%, 60%? What percentage of the people are you planning to enroll that are from the priority population? The other thing here is just to indicate the percentage of budget expended on work-based training. Again, it needs to be at least 40%. And then the final items are summarizing what's your cost per participant, what's your cost per occupational training, cost per work-based training, and then cost per supportive services. And then signing off on the application. So that basically was just kind of a quick review of the grant application itself. And I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. So you can either type the questions or we'll open up the phone line. So if you want to ask questions, we'll go ahead and respond to those. So at this point, we're open to questions dealing with anything dealing with the job-driven NEG. If it has to do with the grant application or the project design, the employment tools, partnership development, whatever it is, feel free to go ahead and ask the questions. And then we'll be turning to myself, Lisa, Gretchen, Bob, John Barr's on the phone also. Okay, so do we have any questions?
Well, Jill, there's some questions that people were typing.
Okay,
Let's address those first. We had one on, is there a maximum length of time for work experience that's allowed? And we've answered that by saying work experience can be up for 6 months and does need to be paid. LWIA 26 had indicated in their survey that they would focus on occupations that require heavy IT computer usage and knowledge, but might not be necessarily classified as IT, such as medical coding and billing. Are they still eligible to apply?
yes, you are still eligible to apply, and I think one of the things we talked about earlier, and I'll have Gretchen expand on this, is that part of our project recognizes that when we talk about, two things I'm going to address. When we talk about IT employers, you tend to think of IT if it's, a Microsoft Corporation or somebody who deals with IT directly. But keep in mind that there's a lot of industries, there's a lot of employers that, including healthcare, that indirectly have a very large component dealing with IT jobs. So when we talk about it, IT, an employer does not have to be an IT employer, but they do need to have IT positions. Now, some of the positions may not sound like an IT position. If we look at an earlier screen and we look at the different occupations that are listed as far as, that was computer systems design or software publishers, those types of things, you may have occupations that are very heavy on the IT focus, but it may not be apparent. And was it 26 or 23 that raised the question, medical coding and billing. Yeah, those are good examples of something that is IT related and is appropriate for this project. Let me turn it over to Gretchen. I know has answered this question and is going to be assisting us, the LWIAs, with helping identify employers and occupations that may not be obvious when we talk about IT. Gretchen, can you join in on the conversation about that?
Yeah, I would have to say that medical coding, although it does have an IT component, wouldn't really be listed as an IT job opening. It would be listed as a healthcare job opening. So when I talked about those 90,000 open IT jobs in Illinois, medical coding wouldn't have been one of those. Jill, you have more expertise than I do in terms of what's allowable from the Department of Labor. But for the interest of really looking into IT jobs, and as you said, this doesn't have to be at an IT company, and there are lots of health IT jobs that can be in hospitals, they can be in clinics, they can be in doctor's offices, that are really taken care of by IT technicians. For example, technicians who go in and help doctors actually get electronic health records software up and running on their computer systems, and who maintain that software for them, and who actually help them understand how their people in their offices and within a hospital use those kinds of tools. But those would be IT technicians who are working in a healthcare facility. So there's a lot of overlap and intersection here that we can be very, very helpful with. And I think that from my perspective, what we really want to focus on here are the IT jobs that you're going to see coming out of the labor market information reports that we'll be giving you from Burning Glass that are actually open and listed in your communities.
Bob or John, do you want to weigh in on that question, either one of you?
Yeah, I think what we did is we took the occupations that were provided in an interest survey to give us the maximum flexibility. But again, I would follow up on Gretchen. I would urge you all to work with CompTIA on the information for your own LWIA, knowing we have that flexibility, but kind of given the first look at those core IT jobs that Gretchen mentioned.
Right, and I would also add, I think that the data that Chris Reynolds has already run for you, and you might want to take another look when you have a minute to look at those projection slides that are included in this presentation, just to give yourself a look at potential opportunities, and to echo what Bob said, that our goal is to provide maximum flexibility, but also to focus on where those real good opportunities are going to be in the IT sector moving forward.
If I can also emphasize that what we're hearing around the state as a whole, especially in healthcare, it's those jobs that Gretchen just mentioned. It's basically that we're hearing over and over again they can't find people, and those are in application support. So those are the people that support, and they actually support those applications that all people use in healthcare, and we're getting over and over again statewide as we go through our healthcare task force that's what they're missing over and over again. So I would urge you all, again, like John said, look at the numbers for your own LWIA that Chris put out as the starting point, but I think Gretchen is going to be able to provide you even richer information. I think you're going to find, even in healthcare, they're going to be popping up left and right.
Oh, yeah, lots of them.
Okay. Next question, are those served under this grant part of WIA performance outcomes? And a related question, can we co-enroll with WIA?
Okay. With the NEG projects, first of all, typically we've co-enrolled individuals, participants in the NEG grants and formula grants, for example, under the DWT project. What I want to do is to get back with you on this, because as of just, I think, a week or so ago, what I thought was the answer to this seemed to get blurred. My initial response to this would be that if someone is enrolled solely in this project, we are held to our goals that we laid out with Department of Labor. They'll be reviewing those, but that we weren't a part of, they're not a part of the performance. They're looked at in the Wizard report, but they weren't a part of performance. Recently, though, discussion with Department of Labor kind of blurred that. So let me get back to you on the answer to that as far as performance. Obviously, yes, you can co-enroll with other, if it's formula grant, whatever it is, whatever makes sense as far as providing comprehensive services, but keep in mind that you can provide core intensive training supportive services under this grant. One of the strategies, though, might be that if you have dislocated workers in your formula grant right now, and if for some reason it makes sense to put them in this project, for example, to do work-based training, OJTs, that type of thing, maybe you don't have funds in your formula to do it, then yes, that would make sense to co-enroll. So the answer to your question is yes, you can co-enroll.
Can the training be at public or private schools?
The training needs to be from the service providers on the approved service provider training list. Okay. And I think that's a variety of parties that's on there.
Are the percentages for admin and partnership activities a percent of actual expenditures or the budget?
They will be of actual expenditures. In developing it now, they're going to be percentages of the budget, but as you implement the project, and let's say you do set aside you plan for 5.7% of admin, it is based on how much you're actually spending. Same thing with the partnership development, and this is the way Department of Labor has laid it out. We at the state level are held to those two percentages based on our expenditures.
Okay. is there a way to find out how many long-term unemployed people there are in the LWIAs?
I think that the quickest, simplest way is to do what many of you do, I think, on an ongoing basis, is working with the IDES office, your unemployment insurance office, your contact, and that seems to have been successful, where you're working with them to get the information. If not, I think that's the best way to approach it as far as the long-term unemployed. We'll see if we also have other statewide reports and how current those are. So that's something we'll follow up on, is the state level information. But we do want to encourage you to talk with your local office, because what we've seen with the other projects is, for the most part, they've been very helpful with our outreach and recruitment, as far as identifying the workers, sending email blasts, doing robocalls, that type of thing.
All right, are there any additional questions? Bob or John or Gretchen, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think you emphasized, I think, all the key points. I would just, again, probably reiterate the overall goal of the project from a numbers standpoint. Joe, what is our target for the state? Was it 520 or 540 participants overall?
Yeah, 520 for the entire state.
Right. So, I mean, if you do a quick math, I mean, you're looking at overall, you know, for the figure available at the local level, it's about $10,000, everything included, you know, all wraparound support, case management. So as far as just a very generic, you know, budget figure, that's what we're looking at. And certainly it's going to be customized to how you're going to operate your program at the local level. And I encourage you to be creative as appropriate in, you know, how you co-enroll them, and you know, looking at how that impacts your performance. And, you know, we're hoping that a lot of the work-based activities will have a very positive impact on your performance, so you might want to consider that as an overall strategy. But again, that's all up to you as you develop your program. And again, I think that we're open to a lot of new approaches and strategies, and want to emphasize that as far as those next steps and the timeline, not to steal Jill's thunder, but that's something that we're going to be emphasizing in September, as well as that really that this is a starting point for the grant, and that we're looking to really use this as, you know, kind of an interim step in the implementation, as Lisa said, of the WIO, and you know, use this as that stepping stone. So you know, happy to work with you on from a budget and a program level. I think we're open to a lot of new ideas and innovative ways of approaching this.
Right, and I think as you think about your application and doing that, then the next step after you submit your application, which is, of course, is September 10th is when they're due, and John mentioned the trainings. Our first training will be September 24th, which will be an NEG peer exchange and training, where we want to bring together some of our LWIAs around the state that have been participating in previous NEGs, and also doing some really cool things around work-based learning. So I will turn it back over to Jill for final comments.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. I do see one dealing with the information, the IDES information, long-term unemployed. So there's a few questions here we're going to follow up on. That's one of them as far as the data. I don't see any other questions. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Feel free to, I guess two things come to mind. Contact Chris Reynolds if you have questions about the data that you're seeing out there when you go to the WorkNet Job-Driven NEG webpage. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them our way. And with the application, one of the things I should mention is that in submitting the applications, submit those to both Lisa and I. We're going to be reviewing those, and as you'll see from the timeline, there's kind of an aggressive timeline as far as you submitting the applications, us getting them reviewed and a decision made, and then starting up with training. So do go ahead and submit those to both Lisa and I, and I guess that's it for now. I'm not seeing any other questions. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to thank everybody for participating today, and the presenters, thank you very much. And I guess that's it then. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.